This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Glynn Tonsor, K-State livestock economist, kicks off the show as he talks about the mostly calm cattle market and how people's finances impact their meat protein purchases. K-State entomologist Jeff Whitworth keeps the show rolling as he chats about brown recluse spiders. Jeff shares where they're most likely to be found and what control may work. Today's show ends with Lexi Averhoff from Kansas FFA discussing her involvement with the Washington Leadership Conference and what she learned to bring back home to her community. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with the cattle market update from K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor. Glynn, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, and good morning, Shelby.
Glynn, when we look at the cattle market, what are we seeing?
Yeah, this past week I would say was pretty calm compared to some past periods at least, and overall low volume. That's important to note too, but it's a pre-holiday comment and we'll probably be saying the same a week from now, at least on low volume part. But AMS called the 5-market fed cattle market at 260, so basically flat the week before. Kansas feeder cattle, almost no quote. Steady to higher trend was something will show up in the AMS reports, but very low volume. It's pre-holiday, and we have lower feeder cattle volume on top of that. So all that's of note. One lot, just for reference, is 57 head weighing 892, came into 363. That would be up a little bit from the week before. But I think on the cash trade, the most important comment is limited volume, no real action this past week.
Is that limited volume really the big contributor to a more calm week for the cattle market?
Yes, as a whole, and maybe fewer surprises this past week than we've had in the weeks before. I usually interject, and it's been a while since I've said this on here, Shelby, is there's nothing wrong with calm weeks, right? So supply and demand fundamentals are always at play, and if we don't have a lot of new information and no shocks and whatever, then our best guess is no change from the week before. And in many ways, that's what I'm basically highlighting here.
What are we seeing for futures?
Yeah, so Friday's close, both would be the August contracts I'm quoting here. Live cattle was $246, down about $2 on the week. Feeder cattle $370, up about $3 on the week. And of note here as well is when we go over to wholesale, so we go to box beef, choice is $391, down almost $3 for the week, but select came in flat. $372 is basically the same as the week before. So yes, I said up, down $2 there, but given the levels we're at, those are less than 1% changes, is fairly small changes, both on cash trade, the board, and in the wholesale marketplace.
Is this pretty common when we think about seasonality for the cattle market?
I don't know if I'd go that far. We're in the middle of grilling season, and you can get updates on grilling demand and so forth. So, we've definitely had points in time where June does have more action than this last week that I'm alluding to here. But I'll repeat my earlier comment is there's nothing wrong. You and I might feel like we have a hard time filling 10 minutes kind of thing, but that's okay. It's good and healthy for markets to not have big shocks. Not all big shocks are desired, but there's been other Junes where we've had more movement.
And looking at the cattle market, wanting to talk about feedlot returns, one of your other projects that you do, and what are we seeing?
Yeah, so most of our listeners know, but shout out again to ASI, Animal Science and Industry Department. They're focused on feedlot survey. So every month you'll find on AgManager our feedlot returns barometer. You and I, when the timing's right, usually highlight this. And this is just kind of a trend of unhedged or cash-oriented, profitability in the Kansas feedlot sector. And the main thing I would say is cattle leaving the yard here the first half of 2026 continue to have positive expected margins. So they're leaving the yard worth more than what we put in them. Positive margin, for example, for June of $313, July almost $200 per head is what you'll find in those projected margins. And even June is projection, even though it's almost done because not all of June is done. But as we look out to the end of 2026, and now we're forecasting into early 2027, we're projecting red ink. And the main thing there is basically flat fed cattle prices, are kind of projected across those next 6-8 months. But those ongoing increases of feeder cattle prices, as well as some increased cost of gain, are both eating at the margin that are being projected. And I've been singing this tune for a while now, and the market has kind of caught up to these projections. So it's done better than the projections for a while. That's important to note. But regardless, the forward-looking projections are red ink, as we look towards the end of 2026. And I anticipate we're going to be talking more about that and kind of the pressure that puts on the feedlot sector specifically. It kind of gets ignored in the cattle expansion discussion, but the feedlot sector, as well as packing processing, faces margin pressure when we don't have enough cattle relative to capacity, and that's showing up in this exercise.
And while we are talking about this, important to note, it doesn't have any risk management tools used, correct?
That's correct. So we are assuming cash is the phrase I use, but you pay the going rate for feeders, you pay the going rate for feed, specifically Garden City corn, and that drives our feed cost calculations. And then you take the Kansas negotiated fed cattle price. So if you're hedging any of those three major legs, then you're going to have a different situation. And probably most importantly there, Shelby, is this is a barometer, right? It doesn't match any one operation perfectly. And if you're implementing some risk management, you're not going to have as high of highs or as low of lows as what I'm putting out on Ag Manager. This is rather showing kind of what the unhedged commodity environment looks like. And that's why you have some plus 500s and minus 500s show up here. And while that can happen for sure for some operations, it's a lot less common. It's way more common somebody's kind of hedged away half of those gains or half of those losses earlier at placement or even pre-placement.
And another important project that you work on that we always talk about, the meat demand monitor. And what are we seeing for people wanting to eat meat in their meals?
Yeah, so again, the shout out to Beef and Pork Checkoff. As you know, this project's based at K-State, and it's an ongoing nationally representative survey. You and I are talking here like the end of June, literally on Saturday. I was able to pull together the June reports. That's what we're referencing here. And a few nuggets here real quick. There's a positive improvement in financial sentiment. That's probably the most important point I want to interject. Too early to tell if that's a new trend or if it's a 1 month anomaly. But I'm starting there because I've been saying for months, but most of 2026, the public's gotten more pessimistic on their finances. The K-shaped economy, those that say they're doing worse than the year before. In May, that was at a record bad. In June, that actually improved. Now, what I mean by that is 19% say their finances are better than they were in June of 25. 34% say they're worse. I would love that 34% to keep shrinking, but it has shrunk compared to May, and that is important. This isn't in the survey, but a Glynn best guess would be the at least initial truce discussion between the U.S. and Iran, some hope of what that means for gas prices, maybe some hope what that means for broader inflation and so forth. Probably was on the mind in the middle of the month when the survey was getting the bulk of its responses. So maybe that's underlying some of that, let's call it pause and pessimism. I hope it's a turn towards optimism, but I'm going to call it a pause and pessimism until we see more than 1 month. But that's really important, Shelby, and that's the part I'm going to drive home with you today, is the more people we have that say their finances are doing worse, the bigger the headwind on meat demand, because meat's what we call a normal good. So demand goes up when income goes up, and demand goes down when income goes down. And a step from that is demand goes down when expected income goes down. And I think that has been weighing on, the May data was pretty pessimistic on a lot of fronts. Hopefully this initial look at June, and this is one of the perks of the MDM, as we get a real early look at it. You and I are talking at it here before the June's even done. That's the part I want to drive home, is there was an improvement in demand, and I think it directly aligns with some improvement in sentiment.
And for your financial sentiment, you have better now, same, or worse now. And even if they go to same, is that still a pause in pessimism?
Maybe, I guess. Same would basically be as I'm in the same financial position as I was a year ago. So it hasn't deteriorated, and that's good. That group is regularly the most common. So here in June, 47% of the public said their finances were the same as June of 25. And that's roughly half the country regularly giving us that. What I really think the action in these numbers is how the other half is split. And even more narrowly, how big is that bottom K, right? How big is the group that's saying they're getting worse? That's what's been growing the last few months. That's what's been showing up in the papers on the much broader affordability discussion and housing affordability and lots of things, right, outside of meat. That's what I'm trying to drive our attention to, is it's really important to track that. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index gets seen a lot in the broader press, like Google or Yahoo Finance, whatever, you'll see that. We're asking similar questions here, so we're following the same similar methods. I hope to see in the next 2 weeks, as more applications of this come out, not just the MDM, that sentiment is improved.
And what are you seeing when it comes to people, what they're willing to pay when they're eating out versus going home and fixing a meal?
when I made the comment overall demand was improving, we can break that down even further, is what you're teeing up. So thank you. Is in the MDM, we track for 2 beef items: ribeye steak, ground beef, 2 pork chop, bacon, chicken breast, and then we have a couple other categories. And we track what you're willing to pay at the grocery store. So think for at-home meat demand. Then we track away from home. So think restaurants, specifically the dinner meal. Again, for similar, 2 beef, 2 pork, chicken breast products. And pretty much across the board, the meat demand numbers, what you're willing to pay per pound or per dinner meal, was up in June compared to May. And that is great. What my thesis here is that improved sentiment aligns with that. I was sharing kind of the opposite story in many ways in May. I'll interject here. Anne-Marie Ronick, which some of our listeners know, is 21 years in as the leader of the Power of Meat report. So every month she puts out lots of information, pulls from Circana scanner data, like what is the pattern in actual prices paid in the grocery store. So this is not an MDM point, it's an augmenting the MDM. The May data that Anne-Marie put out was showing weakness in the meat demand space, was a fairly new statement, not a fun one to talk about. So those of us who geek out in the space, were quite concerned in the month of May. Was that a turning point specifically for beef demand? To be determined what those scanner data, right, look like for June. But this initial look from the MDM, again, that's the whole point of the survey, is it's ahead of that, is maybe May was the low point and we're getting a better, looks like June might be better. I hope to confirm that in the weeks ahead, but that would be the punchline is, yours truly can be called Dr. Bear. Most economists are pessimistic by training, but we got to be, speak the data. And here we had some improved optimism show up in the data, and I hope to see that continue.
Glenn, I appreciate taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure, Shelby.
That was K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor. Looking forward, you will be able to find the meat demand monitor on AgManager.info. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing brown recluse spiders with K-State entomologist Jeff Whitworth. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Jeff, is this the time of year for brown recluse spiders to be making their way out where people might be seeing them?
Yes, apparently it is, because I've been getting a lot of calls and pictures of brown recluse spiders and other spiders, but mainly the brown recluse is the one everybody's most concerned about. Although, some people are arachnophobic, which means they're scared of or they don't like all arachnids. And again, spiders are arachnids. They're not insects. But to answer your question, brown recluse spiders are active from about March through about October. From late October, November until, again, every year is a little bit different. Till the 1st of March, they're inactive. So I always tell folks, if you're worried about brown recluse spiders being in a really overly infesting a room or a barn or a shed, if you want to clean that out, which we highly recommend, that is a good time to do it in the spring when they're inactive. But that's not the time to spray because they're not going to get into the spray. So it's a time to clean out anything where you may have a place harboring brown recluse spiders. So they're active from that period of time in the summer because they're out and about looking for food. They are predaceous or scavengers. They'll actually feed on dead or dying insects or their own kind or other spiders up to a point. Once that insect is dead and it has dried up, they won't feed on it because spiders have to suck the juice out of a juicy insect or spider. So once it's dried, they can't utilize it for food. But they're mostly nocturnal, so that's why they're out and about at night. As it starts to get light, they come into someplace where it's dark, shaded, or some protective place to spend the day. That's why we always recommend, if you leave your clothes or you leave your shoes on the floor at night, be sure and shake them out really good before you put them back on in the morning. A lot of folks, when they go out and open up a shed or a barn to get the harvesting equipment or the planting equipment or whatever it is, they bump into these things or they move their hiding spot around and they're out active. And that's when a lot of people come into contact with brown recluse spiders during the day. At night, they're active. During the day, they're not. But they are more active than they are in the winter. even during the day. So they're out looking for food. So keep that in mind. The best way, the question I always get, how do I control these things? First of all, in my opinion, and we did a little survey 7 or 8 years ago, the brown recluse spider is probably the most common spider inhabiting houses, barns, sheds, restaurant, whatever, that we have in Kansas. But as the name implies, it's reclusive. So they're very shy. They don't like folks probably as bad as folks don't like them. So they try and avoid human contact as much as we try and avoid brown recluse spider contact. The way we actually went about surveying, we were looking for cast skins. As insects or spiders or, reptiles, as they grow, they have to grow out of the old skin and produce a new one. The brown recluse spider has a very characteristic cast skin. So if you just see the old skin, hanging on a little webbing in a corner, or you can immediately tell if it's a brown recluse. They're very, very easily distinguished from all other spiders. So that's the best way to tell if you have brown recluse. If you see cast skins, the old skin hanging out someplace, chances are it's a brown recluse, because I don't know why, but for some reason they're more stable. They last longer so that you can see them better. The brown recluse will also build a little bit of a webbing wherever they're hiding overnight, and they usually try and come back to that. But like I said, sometimes they're out chasing prey and they can't, so they get in whatever they can. But for the most part, they like to be in and out of public contact or out of the way of people. So anytime you're out and about and you're moving something in storage that hasn't been, be careful. That's where they probably are. If they all take off running, they're just going to other places. So the best way to help control brown recluse spiders, number one, sanitation. Get rid of all the old stuff you don't need. If you have a whole bunch of stuff stored in the basement or sheds or garage, get rid of all of the stuff that you can. Anything like that, that's where they like to hide during the day, and they just come out at night looking for prey. So get rid of that. The second question I always get about control, does spraying help? If I call my local pest control operator and have a general crack and crevice treatment, does that help? It doesn't hurt. Again, we did a 3-year study on the best way to control brown recluse spiders. Number one, get rid of everything you can that's stored out of the way. That prevents their overwintering in out of the way places. But if you spray a general spray around the outside and the inside of your house, that will kill the insects. Remember, they are out looking for insects to feed on. So if you eradicate insects, again, that's a little tough to do, but if you get rid of all the insects, the brown recluse doesn't have anything to feed on. They will feed on each other for a little while. So if you do that 3 or 4 months, 5 or 6 months, you'll eventually reduce the population of brown recluse spiders also. It's really tough to get rid of all of them, but you will reduce them just because you're killing their food source. Now, the other question I always get is, if you spray, does the spray actually kill brown recluse? We've tested several different insecticides. If you get the spray on the spider, it will kill it. If the spider comes into contact with the insecticide while it's still damp before it is completely dried, it will kill it. Okay. After it's dried, there's not much residual activity as far as brown recluse spiders go, because they walk on, the tips of their feet, actually their little hairs down there, so they don't get into much of the insecticide as it is. So that's not a good way of reducing the population of brown recluses, but it is because you're killing their food source over a period of time. The other question I get, what about brown recluse spiders and black widows? Because black widow spiders, at least from the polling I've done a little bit and the emails I get, brown recluse spiders are the most common, but black widows are becoming a little more common around the state. Those are the two spiders that we really need to worry about as far as venom goes if they bite you. All spiders are poisonous. All spiders use that venom to kill their spray and then suck the juice out. But those are the only two, the black widow and the brown recluse, that really are of any major concern to people. You may be allergic to other kind of spider venom, but they're not as bad as the brown recluse and the black widow. The black widow is a web weaver, so they'll have a web in the corner of your garage or the corner of your shed, and they wait for insects or their other spiders to get in and get caught in their webbing. Then they'll run down there and start feeding on it. So they're not out and about as much. If you come into a black widow, it's because you've come into a corner of your garage or your shed or something. It's the brown recluse that's out and about that people come into contact with more. They're very distinctive. I think maybe now most people realize what a brown recluse looks like. They're easily distinguished from other spiders. They're a little more flattened. They have this light top part of them with what we call an hourglass shape, a dark spot on the top. They're very characteristic. The thing is, there are a lot more than you think, but when these eggs hatch, and the eggs are just the ones I've seen, and we have a couple that we're still rearing, the eggs just hatched in the last month or two. And those brown recluse spiders are really, really tiny. So you don't notice those things, but they're really small, and they're eating very, very tiny insects or each other. So as they develop, they become more noticeable. The brown recluse will go into the overwintering November, late October, November, as a young spider or maybe an adult, and they will actually last, or we've kept them for 3 or 4 years. In nature, I'm guessing they'll last that long. Also, they'll live that long, maybe a little longer. Sometimes after big rain, some place gets washed out or gets flooded. That will cause them to move also. You're not going to drown them. Again, spiders and insects, they float. For the most part, all the pictures I've gotten in the last week or so, they're from old barns, sheds, garages where it looks to me like there's a lot of storage, or out in the yard where there's a brown recluse, crawling across the sidewalk or something, because they are found naturally in Kansas, so they can wash them out from under rocks or wherever they're hiding outside also. So they're very common. They're very reclusive. If you get one on you, flick it off. Don't try and squish it, because sometimes if you smack it, and it's easier said than done, but if you smack it, sometimes you may push the fangs into your skin inadvertently, so they're not really biting you, but you still get the venom introduced into your system. So that's kind of the story on the brown recluse spiders.
Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
My pleasure. Anytime.
That was K-State entomologist Jeff Whitworth. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue the show with Kansas FFA member Lexi Averhoff, who is also the Southwest District President and a recipient of a Kansas FFA Alumni Washington Leadership Conference Scholarship. Lexi, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about what WLC really is?
So WLC is the Washington Leadership Conference, where students and FFA members from all across the nation travel to Washington, D.C. During this conference, we're kind of going out with our mission of leadership and serving our communities. We come up with what's called a LTS plan, which is a living to serve plan. So during this conference, we're kind of thinking about our own community's needs and what we can bring back to our community from this conference. We get to meet with we met with our state representatives along with all other students from all across the nation. There's currently 400 students here, and this is only one of the 5 weeks. So this is a great opportunity to meet people and to improve your leadership and your ability to serve.
So far, what has been your favorite parts of this?
So, yes, yesterday evening, we got to go and tour all the monuments in Washington, D.C. We did a night tour, so we loaded 10 different buses with all of the students, and then we drove to different monuments like the Lincoln Memorial, the Reflective Pool, and all kinds of different ones. It was so cool getting to travel with such a big group and see all of these things that make our nation what it really is.
you guys are going to be bringing things back to your community. What is something that you hope to bring back to yours?
My community is definitely agriculture based, and I think that making the younger members of our community ready to serve and lead the agriculture field in my community is very important to me. I think that the younger generation taking over these family farms, they really need to have that leadership aspect and to learn all different ways to do that.
What is the networking like really over the next few days, and how beneficial is it for you to learn about, maybe what's happening all across the country from these other FFA members?
The networking is absolutely amazing. Like I said, there's 400 students here, so you can learn something about every corner of the country. The agriculture is so different in all these different parts, so it's definitely cool to learn about those things. We break out into smaller different groups for some of our sessions. We have kind of some from all over, so that's kind of a closer knit community to make those relationships with, along with some of our large group things where all 400 of us are in one room. So there's definitely lots of opportunity to meet new people and to learn about those different opportunities in agriculture.
So I know that you are a scholarship winner for this conference. And can you talk a little bit about what that means to you to get this opportunity to come?
The scholarship was definitely so helpful. I'm so grateful to the Alumni Association. I'm so grateful to have that opportunity to make my payment for this conference a lot easier for me and my family. So I'm very thankful for that.
What advice would you give to other FFA members who are possibly interested in either this conference or possibly other conferences that are going on where they can network with other people and learn things to bring back to their communities?
Just take the opportunity. I think taking an opportunity is the first step to learning new things and bettering your own community. I mean, you get to come to Washington, D.C., or you get to go to these different places and meet all kinds of people. And me personally, I love to meet new people, so I find them really fun.
How exciting is it to kind of get to be in the house and meeting with people who obviously are leaders in the industry and really our country?
It was really exciting because it's so cool to we're in Washington, D.C., so far from home. And then I talked to a couple people, some of our representatives from Kansas or some of those people who work in those politic type communities. And a lot of them said that they were from a rural agriculture community. And seeing that connection to them just really makes you think that you can do those big things and that you could be that leader of our country and our state.
Lexi, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much.
Again, that was Kansas FFA member and Southwest District President Lexi Averhoff.